This is Leader Time by FedNet, your podcast source for remarks by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Republican Leader Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor during the 2024 lame duck session of the United States Congress. Schumer discussed a continuing resolution that extends funding to March, the defense bill ahead of a passage vote, drones and the Social Security Fairness Act, also ahead of a first procedural vote. He then recognized departing Senators Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Bob Casey of Pennsylvania. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
So last night, I think as everyone knows by now, congressional leaders released the text of bipartisan legislation that will keep the government open, deliver critical disaster relief, extend vital health care programs, and protect our farmers. With this agreement, we are now on our way to avoiding a government shutdown. The sooner Congress acts, the better. As always, bipartisan cooperation must lead the way. We can't have last-minute delays or grandstanding, or else the American people won't get the funding they deserve, or else we could risk a shutdown. Now, there are many good things in this bill that Democrats worked hard for and achieved. Democrats have insisted these agreements must not have cuts, and this bill has no cuts. Democrats have warned we can't have poison pills, and this bill has no poison pills. And Democrats pushed hard to make sure this agreement included millions for child care, workforce training, job training, funding to rebuild the Key Bridge, and more. There are three things in particular that I pushed hard, very hard for, and I'm glad to see in the bill. Policies to outcompete China, including outsourcing, policies on artificial intelligence, and policies to bring manufacturing back to America, including chip production. The package includes new restrictions I pushed for to restrict the flow of U.S. investment to CCC development of technologies like AI and chips. I'm also very pleased this agreement helps alleviate supply chain disruptions, alleviates price spikes, and increases chip investment in the U.S. I also pushed especially hard to get a strong disaster relief package into the bill, and I'm really glad we got that done too. Federal disaster relief programs are about exhausted, and I've warned that doing nothing would come back to haunt us. Communities across the Southeast, across the Northeast, and in fact across America still need help rebuilding from the aftermath of hurricanes, flooding, wildfires, and other acts of Mother Nature that have grown far more powerful because of climate change. So it's very good news this disaster package got into the bill. And there are other good things in the bill, too. We permanently secured 9/11 responder and survivor health funding. We secured important provisions related to Haiti, extended protection for farmers, dealt with the nature of lithium-ion batteries that might explode on bikes, and much, much more. Now, clearly, this CR isn't perfect. It does not include everything Democrats called for, and it includes some provisions we wouldn't have added. But this CR is a sound and bipartisan and necessary compromise that will keep the government open and deliver many, many good things for the American people. So now, time is of the essence. The sooner Congress acts, the better. If we want to avoid an unnecessary government shutdown right before Christmas, Republicans must work with Democrats to pass this CR quickly. Now on the NDAA. Later this morning, the Senate will hold a vote to pass the annual Defense Authorization Bill, the NDAA. Congress has passed the NDAA on a bipartisan basis for over 6 straight decades, and this year will be no different. Many feared that it would, given the polarization, given the late date, but no, we're passing the NDAA, and that's a very good thing. The NDAA isn't perfect, but it still includes some very good things that Democrats fought for. Just like in the CR, it has strong provisions to stand up against the Chinese Communist Party here on a national security basis. It boosts our use of AI for national defense. This is one of the things our forums on AI talked about early on and is now in the bill. And it expands tech innovation here at home by expanding money to tech hubs. that I'm particularly glad that the NDAA expands the Tech Hub program that I created with Senators Young, Cantwell, and others in the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act. And these funds are going to transform communities in upstate New York, the Midwest, and across the country that hadn't been focused on tech are now going to become the epicenters of innovation and of manufacturing, high-end manufacturing. This is something these rural areas, these smaller cities across upstate New York and the Midwest needed, and they're getting some more. They're getting some more dollars in this regard, so there'll be more tech hubs. Again, I thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for the good work on the NDAA, especially Chairman Reed and Ranking Member Wicker. On drones. This afternoon, I will come to the Senate floor to stand with Senator Peters to take up legislation to respond to the recent reports of unusual drone activity. I am proud to co-sponsor this bipartisan legislation, which the FBI, DHS, DOD, and FAA all support. Let me say that again. This legislation is supported by just about every group, every federal group concerned. The FBI, the DHS, Department of Defense, and the FAA. The Senate should pass our bill without delay. Our bill, among other things, explicitly authorizes state and local authorities to conduct drone detection and helps them better coordinate with federal law enforcement agencies to keep communities safe. The utter confusion surrounding these drone sightings shows that the feds can't respond all on their own. The federal government needs help from local officials detecting these drones. But right now, the locals have neither the authority or resources to act. Our bill will fix that. All the federal agencies involved say they need local help. Drones are relatively new, but they're all over the place. And many of them, you know, you don't want to tell people they can't fly drones for recreational use and many other commercial uses. So it's a difficult area, and we don't have broad-reaching federal legislation on where drones on drones, even though we do say they can't be near airports and be near military facilities and can't fly below 4,000 feet, but that's about it. So there's a desperate need, until the federal government does more on this new issue of drones, for the locals to participate. The feds want the locals to participate. There's no reason they shouldn't. So I hope the Senate will pass our bipartisan drone legislation later today. On Social Security, finally, Mr. President, the Senate will before I pay tribute to two of our retiring colleagues, the Senate will take a very important vote this afternoon to ensure that no American who has chipped into Social Security is wrongly denied well-earned benefits. This afternoon, we will vote on whether or not to take up the Social Security Fairness Act, a bill repealing two flawed policies that eat away at the benefits of many Americans who at some point or another worked as teachers, firefighters, postal workers, and other public sector workers. When we vote today, retirees deprived of their benefits will be watching closely. Every senator will decide who will vote to secure their benefits and who will stand in the way to waste this golden opportunity to make a law. Now, two of our departing colleagues will deliver their farewell addresses on the floor, Senator Bob Casey and Senator Kyrsten Sinema. I'll start with a few words about Senator Sinema. I was proud to work with her on many different issues, and whenever we did team up together, it was a potent team, and we got a lot of good things done. But, as I'm sure Kyrsten would be the first to say, we also disagreed a lot. Kyrsten is independent. That's how she's always been. I respect that. So whether we agreed or disagreed, I never questioned two things. One, that she cared deeply about her work, and two, that she would always stay true to herself and to the people of Arizona who elected her. During her time in the Senate, Kyrsten has had a hand in passing some of this majority's biggest accomplishments: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Chips and Science Act, the PACT Act, the Gun Safety Act, and the Respect for Marriage Act, and others as well. She was also a trusted negotiator. She has a keen ability to find consensus, even on the toughest issues when it wasn't easy, but she always kept at it. On our caucus, on numerous occasions, partnered with her, usually in crunch time, to work with Republicans to help get bills over the finish line, and that's when Kirsten was at her best, when it was time to reach an agreement. I will always respect Kirsten for her excellent work on these hard moments. I know many senators on both sides will feel the same. So we thank Senator Sinema for her service, her contributions, her commitment to Arizona, and wish her well in whatever comes next. This afternoon, our dear friend Bob Casey will also come to the floor to deliver his farewell speech. After many, many distinguished and very successful years serving the people of Pennsylvania. Now, with a career as distinguished as Bob's, there are many things you can say what he meant to his beloved home state. And he loved and breathed Pennsylvania. It's a big, diverse state, and he knew every corner of it, was loved and respected in every corner of it. Here's what his people called him: a champion for Pennsylvania workers, a champion for middle-class families, a champion for children, a champion for seniors, a champion for disability rights, a champion for clean energy and the environment, a champion in the fight against corporate gouging. That's just some of the ways that people describe Bob. During his 18 years in the Senate, there are very few issues that he didn't champion. It's not hard to understand where he got such a strong work ethic. Like Joe Biden, he's from Scranton, where hard work is the rule, not the exception. If you combine that work ethic with an innate sense of public service as the son of a governor, as somebody who deeply cares about the people he represents, and it's genuine, and comes out of every pore of his body, you'll get a fighter who works as hard as the people he represents. You'll get Bob Casey. When Pennsylvania coal miners suffering from black lung disease needed help, he successfully fought to get their benefits and made sure they got medical help. He was an amazing advocate for our nation's children, always making sure that they had the support they needed to reach their full potential. He championed efforts to expand access to early childhood health care, child nutrition, family tax benefits, and was one of the biggest advocates for extending the CHIP, or Children's Health Insurance Program, which kept so many kids healthy, millions of poorer kids healthy. And he will go down as one of the Senate's greatest champions ever in all of history when it comes to disability policies. With our former colleague, Tom Harkin, when our former colleague, Tom Harkin, retired, many people wondered who would carry on as the voice for Americans with disabilities. Without hesitation and with amazing success, Bob stepped up to the plate. In the years since, he has been instrumental in passing legislation to advance the rights of people with disabilities and help them live free from discrimination. He didn't have any personal connections to the disability community, nor was he trying to score political points. He did it all simply because it was the right thing to do. And Mr. President, he was one of the most beloved members of our caucus. People loved Bob, everybody. No one ever said a bad word about Bob Casey. Why? Why? Because he cared so much, was so hardworking, was so effective, and was one of the most genuine people that we have ever seen in this Senate, not just now, but throughout history. He leaves a deep impression on every one of us. He does. And the guy had it all, and in such a nice way. He got things done. He was hardworking. He didn't take no for an answer. But when he came back at you, time and time again, because he was so committed, so well prepared, so sincere, and so nice, he always said yes. It's one of the reasons he was so effective. So that sums up the man, Bob Casey. And let's not forget, he always did the right thing, even in difficult political situations. I would talk to him. We need your help here, Bob. We need your vote there. He'd struggle with it. He knew it might have bad political consequences, but he inevitably did the right thing. He is as good, as decent, as honorable as any senator I've worked with in this chamber. He had a beautiful wife. He has a beautiful wife, Therese. The entire Casey family, I say to all of them, thank you for sharing Bob with us all these years. Thank you for backing him up, despite some tragedies your family has had. And Bob, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your friendship. And simply, thank you for being you. I yield the floor.
McConnell discussed a pending water resources bill, judicial nominations, and retiring Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema hours before her farewell speech on the floor.
Mr. President,
Republican leader.
ask consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Last week, the House passed the Water Resources Bill with broad bipartisan support. Today, it's the Senate's turn to act. Thanks in large part to the leadership of Ranking Member Capito and her team, the sensible legislation before us will strengthen our nation's water infrastructure from the Everglades to the Port of Los Angeles to the inland waterways that course through Kentucky. It's good news for communities across the country, from clean drinking water to ecosystem maintenance to storm resilience to navigable waterways for trade and commerce. The bill before us takes a comprehensive approach. And because our communities understand their challenges better than any bureaucrat in Washington, this bill would provide the flexibility to tailor solutions to each community's unique needs. I'm also pleased it will authorize several projects important to the health and well-being of Kentuckians. One will build out infrastructure for water and wastewater treatment in Appalachia, always a concern for rural communities across America's heartland. Another will help secure safe and reliable drinking water for a growing number of families in Scott County. And finally, another will update Greenbrier Lake Dam, which supplies water for Kentuckians across Montgomery County. So far, an impressive broad coalition has thrown their support behind the bill, from ports and shippers to farm groups and unions to dozens of industry leaders who rely on our waterways to move goods, protect jobs, and keep costs low for the American people. I appreciate the House's work to move this must-pass bill forward in a bipartisan fashion. Obviously, I hope the Senate will do the same today. President Biden's decision earlier this month to pardon his son may well have set a unique and unfortunate precedent. But abuse of the presidential pardon doesn't stop there. Last week, the president went on to commute 1,500 sentences. And the way liberal activists see it, he should have done even more. More than 20 liberal retired judges, including the Boston radical who recommended the disgraced pro-crime U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins, have now urged the president to turn his eye to federal death sentences. They claim that federal death penalty is, quote, rife with fundamental problems, including race discrimination and poor representation of defendants. But this is not just some rhetorical recommendation about systemic injustice. If the president heeded these former judges' call, it would mean commuting the death sentences of the mass murderer who slaughtered black churchgoers at Mother Emanuel in Charleston, and the perpetrator of the massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. Are these men the victims of systemic racism? Do they have inadequate counsel? Of course not. They are mass murderers, guilty beyond any doubt whatsoever. Let's be clear what commuting these sentences would mean. It would mean that the laws passed by Congress and applied by our judges and juries have no value. It would mean that progressive politics is more important to the president than the lives taken by these murderers. It would mean that society's most forceful condemnation of white supremacy and anti-Semitism must give way to legal mumbo-jumbo. The irony of claims of systemic racism causing the president to spare Dylan Roof is ludicrous to the point of tragedy. There is no legacy a president should seek. Now, on an entirely different matter from the president's unfortunate legacy, I'd like to close with just a few words about another of our departing colleagues, the senior senator from Arizona. It's perhaps unconventional for the leader of one party to pay formal tribute to a departing senator who's caucused with the other side. But then Kyrsten Sinema has never had trouble with bucking a trend. For one thing, she spent her 6 years in this body earning levels of influence, respect, and command of policy that are uncommon among Senate freshmen. She's thrown herself into worthwhile projects, done the heavy lifting of legislation, and kept at it when longer tenured colleagues might have thrown in the towel. Needless to say, Senator Sinema's maverick streak extends to her efforts to broaden the Senate's fashion horizons as well. But the cornerstone of our colleague's legacy in this chamber will be her willingness to defend the Senate itself, when saying nothing would have been a great deal easier. Arizona's senior senator stood up in the face of a grave threat to this institution's defining characteristic, and she said, no. And in doing so, she sent a message that will resonate long after her departure from the chamber. I admire our colleague for the courage, wisdom, and clarity that have guided her service for the people of Arizona and for the entire nation. And I wish her the very best in the next chapter.
Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Please visit us online at www.fednet.net for planned broadcast and transcript coverage.